Welcome to another episode of Leader Generation, brought to you by Tenlo Radio. Our guest today is the VP of Platforms and Ecosystems at HubSpot, Scott Brinker. He is also the editor of chiefmartech.com and the chair of the Martech Conference. Scott, thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to have you as a guest today.
Great to be here with you, Tessa.
So this may sound like a really basic question, but where would we find the machine learning algorithms to use?
Oh yeah. So a lot of the platforms now, have these capabilities, but also if you look at some of the, tools for like business intelligence, like these are capabilities they now have built in and they have existing models for. And again, you can get as simple or as sophisticated as you want. Like there's some of these tools that you don't need anyone else to help you with. You can kind of just point it at the core data and let it do its segmentation. There's others where you might want to be like, okay, maybe I want someone on the IT or the data side to do a little bit of fine tuning, with me, because you can, like anything, you can have a simple version of this, or you can get incrementally more and more sophisticated. But yeah, there's a ton of tools across this. This is how all these like personalization platforms work. Like if you look at a bunch of them, you'll like see, I mean, the first step in personalization, is like understanding the segmentation of, who you want to map different characteristics of content or offers to.
That is awesome. So if I wanted to get started, it's more important, again, to know what question I'm asking and to start with the platforms. And if there's something available for me to sort of test on my own, and then after that, it'd be like, okay, maybe I don't have the right data, or maybe I didn't ask the right questions, and then get help from there.
Yeah, and I mean, again, like, these things, when you're talking about, like customer segmentation, this usually tends to be a pretty core strategic decision, for a marketer, and so I think it's okay to experiment with some things on the side, but, once you make a decision of like, okay, I actually want to adopt the technology that's going to help me, get the segmentation right, then, that's when you do like a full review. You'll very often then like, bring in someone from IT to, help sanity check it as well too. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think sometimes I feel like it's hard to make the case, especially when not all your data is in one place and it might be in different places. You have to start that sort of getting buy-in journey really early.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. That is actually, I'm really glad you brought that up, because that is essentially the Achilles heel of like so many of these AI superpowers, is at the end of the day, these are algorithms that are operating on data. And, it's like the garbage in, garbage out. Like if you feed it the right data and you feed it the complete data, these algorithms can work absolute miracles, but yeah, if you're feeding it in poor quality data or partial data, or you're missing key data sets, I mean, the algorithm doesn't know that, so it like works with what you give it. And that is usually the single biggest, factor in like the success or failure, of leveraging these machine learning technologies is like, are you giving them the right data?
Yes. So another piece of, getting that internal buy-in and the coordination is around security, compliance, and regulatory. And this comes up a lot, especially with a lot of our larger clients. What does that process look like, and what have the platforms and networks done, and even the apps inside of them, to address these frequently asked questions around security and compliance?
Yeah, and they're great questions. So compliance is actually pretty straightforward at this point in time. Like, we understand the rules. If you're say GDPR compliant, odds are you're also CCPA compliant. And I mean, there's just, some good clean living about like, we need to make sure we have permission, from contacts we bring in. We need to make sure that if that contact ever decides they don't want to hear from us, we can like properly scrub them, throughout our systems. And so a lot of the platforms and apps have simply implemented these capabilities because they need to, right? Their customers need it. They can't sell it without it. Security is a little bit of a trickier issue though, because security is very often not just a black and white thing. Like compliance is almost black and white. It either is GDPR compliant or it's not. Security is a little bit more of a continuum of you can get more and more secure to ultimately the most secure thing would be pull all the plugs and disconnect everything from the internet and nobody's breaking into this. Well, at least unless if they physically come and take, but obviously that's not practical. And so this is one of the things where I think IT teams that do this as part of their official, vendor review process of going through vendors and saying, okay, well, no security is perfect, but here's a set of criteria we can look at to say okay, are they doing these best practices? Is, all of these connections, are we making sure they're encrypted? Where is the data stored? Is the data encrypted when it's, there's just some, really good things that, again, a professional IT person, they don't have to be involved in the entire vendor evaluation process, because there's a lot of these things that are marketing use cases that they won't care about. But to be able to bring them in and okay, take a really skeptical view of is this app secure? Is this app, what are the questions we need to ask, to make sure that it's secure and reliable? And so it's a big part of it.
Are there any tests that are common that people can run or request the app company to run to sort of prove how secure they are?
Yes, there's a whole cottage industry of tools, for doing that. My opinion is they're useful, but to be honest, a lot of the vulnerabilities that these tools look for are kind of the well-known vulnerabilities. It's good to check them. It's good to make sure they have that. But where security risks come in, so I'm not a cybersecurity expert, so don't hold me to any of this. But I'm pretty sure I've read that the majority of real security breaches actually happen because of somebody inside the company. Who is either able to intentionally or accidentally do something that causes a bunch of data to then be, released out into the world. This becomes a very different kind of issue. And, it's in that case, it's not like you can't really run a penetration test, to see okay, well, is this app secure? You have to start to get into this mode of okay, who has access to the app? What sort of permissions do they have with that app? Is there an audit trail of the activity that is done, with these things? And so, again, I'm not a cybersecurity person, but a cybersecurity person, they've got a pretty clear list of things okay, let's go through and check this, what are the risks? What are the risks that are inherent to the software? And what are the risks that are more associated with the management and the operation of this, and make sure that we put in good policies and principles for how people are using it?
Yeah, I really like that. It comes back to, you need to know what problem you're trying to solve, and then where is it connected to? Who's connected to it? Who's accessing it? And how much of that is necessary, so you can kind of control that risk and have a really good conversation with your IT team when you're ready. And sometimes I feel like we don't have that information prepared. They're just going to say no.
Which again, everyone has a role to play, and I think the security professionals in IT, they've got a tough job. It's one of those things whenever there is a security problem, it's going to be their neck on the line. And so, there's this tendency to want to be as restrictive as possible to prevent that. But at the same time, we recognize okay, well, to get totally restrictive is, again, the scenario where you pull everything out from the wall and, we won't do business with anyone because, oh my God, something could go wrong. And so it's this balance and this trade-off. And I think what usually we see is the best outcomes are when, IT and security and the marketing teams are collaborating together, and they're just really trying to understand, okay, what are the business needs, what are the security concerns, and how do we find the right balance between those? There is a rational middle ground.
Yes, yes. So I'm going to switch topics to another trend that gets covered in the martech conference, which is sales marketing alignment. And this is a really big sort of hot button trend for a lot of the industries we serve. Sales marketing alignment is incredibly important for generating leads. It's important for growth. It's important for retaining great salespeople and helping them feel supported. Where does this platform, the networks, or do you have any favorite applications or processes that have really helped elevate or bring sales marketing alignment to life? Because sometimes I feel like it's been getting a lot of lip service and we say we have it, but it is a lot of work and it is tedious. So it falls right in that bucket.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like the old challenge used to be alignment between marketing and IT. And I think we're much better at that now. Yeah, the new challenge is the alignment between marketing and sales. So one of the things that can help is leveraging a platform that is shared between marketing and sales. And there's now a fair number that, operate this way. So, again, I'm thinking of HubSpot, but also Salesforce, right? It's this thing of like, okay, I have a set of marketing tools that my marketing team uses. I have a set of sales tools that my sales team uses, but the underlying platform is the same. And so you're getting alignment around the source, the system of record, the source of truth for like the customer, the information we have, what have they done, what campaigns have they participated in, what stage are they at in the buying process, and so even just getting that data aligned is a really good first step. And then on top of that becomes then where you're like, okay, now let's start to decide, the organizational layer, the process layer, of when do we turn over, things, what criteria do they have, to become like, from a marketing qualified lead to a sales qualified lead, what are the responsibilities of marketing to support sales as people move from sales qualified lead, through the later stages of the funnel. And so this might be, work for like sales enablement support. It might be things for like providing sequences and, support for like sales ops teams, to be able to, do their work. The technology that I would say the only silver bullet from a technology perspective is getting to a shared platform, across both teams. But the process work that you layer on top of that, that's still one of the things that it has to be done at it's a human organizational challenge much more than a technical challenge.
Yes. So we still have to have these conversations with salespeople and kind of find out what data can we use to improve the quality of leads, and what information matters to them and what should be coming back to them, and then search in the platform for that solution. Have you seen any, the number one question we get all the time, especially from sales teams, is they want more and higher quality leads.
Big surprise.
Right. They're just like, all marketing does is generate, crap leads. I don't want to call any of these people. What is happening? Have you seen any good examples of marketers who have gotten that right, who have found either a suite of tools or an application that has helped them improve that quality or helped improve targeting?
Yeah, I think there's two ways to attack that. So one is the actual quality of the lead itself, and I think this is where, so the work I did before HubSpot at Ion Interactive was all about creating these interactive apps that were built by marketers largely to solicit more detailed insights from prospects about what are their real pain points, what's the way they're framing their challenges, so that you could provide a richer profile to the sales team, so that once it becomes a sales owned lead, the salespeople, have something really meaningful to go on. And so I think that's one way to solve it. The other way is, just to defend the marketing profession, sometimes it's not the fault of the marketing team that the leads aren't qualified. Sometimes it's the way the sales team is reaching out to those leads isn't working, right? The truth is, like, cold calling, like all these, techniques that we've kind of like driven into the ground over the years, that their efficacy is limited, and I think one of the things you see with really successful companies now is they're getting very, very clever about how salespeople engage with prospects once they become a qualified lead. Like, it might not actually be calling them on their phone like 20 times. It might not be sending them like hippo videos or things like this. It might be like, oh, listen, here's actually this new research that just came out. I thought you would be interested in this. I forwarded this to you. It's like these sort of like start to build some trust and some relationship, and almost leave it open enough that, the customer actually, says, yes, actually, ooh, wow, I'm really glad you sent me that. I am interested in this. Can I call you? I mean, there's a ton of these things that we can do. I mean, if you start with the assumption that ultimately the customer is looking for a solution, then there's really creative ways that we can get their attention and engage them and make that journey enjoyable for them. It's you have to work at this, and because it is a combination of marketing and sales, that has to be done in a collaboration. But yeah, I mean, like, wow, the innovation that's happening in the sales enablement space at this point, I think, is such a great example of how marketing and sales have a lot of opportunity to work together to really change the efficacy, of that funnel.
I think you asked a really big question that I've never heard put this way, but starting with make the journey for the customer enjoyable. I'm not sure if we take a step back and ask that question enough and say, are we doing something that brings someone joy? We always say, well, I think they'll be interested in this. I think it'll bring them value. But what could we get a higher level of engagement if the experience was actually enjoyable?
Yeah, I mean, this is hard stuff, but this is the advantage. It's like, it's hard because it's not obvious how to do that. But as a result, when you come up with these ideas and you execute them, you stand out because your competitors haven't thought of it either. They haven't like figured it out. I mean, for most companies, right, the average is still in that mode of like, yep, give me a list of names and numbers and I'll just, speed dial them one after another until some poor sap finally picks up, it just, there's a lot of companies doing that, and the efficacy of those, techniques just continues to drop. So yeah, if you're willing to be creative, it's arguably a phenomenal time, because the creativity really can make a pretty big delta, in the performance, that you have relative to your peers.
So what you're saying is there is no silver bullet that we can pick an application and just start generating tens of thousands of super high quality leads with little effort and little input from the sales team.
It's sort of like those stock pickers, like, okay, if I buy this software that will do the stock picking for me and I'll be a multimillionaire, you're like, okay, well, yeah, well, if you're going to buy that, why isn't everybody else going to buy that too? And then we're right back where we started. So yeah, there's no silver bullet.
I think one of the positives, though, that we covered earlier in the conversation is there are tools to take away the kind of mental strain that tedious activities take up, and that can help us sort of accomplish our wishes in a shorter window of time, so that we're able to give the love and passion and energy to these more creative endeavors, which is exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, those tools that then help, with some of these new creative capabilities, that are the barriers to using them are low enough that you can experiment with them. Yeah, this is how you find those like novel ways of capturing the attention of your prospects.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on our show. This conversation has been wildly interesting and insightful. Before we go, do you have any other tips or pointers or trends that you think people should be looking out for, especially heading into 2021, where if one thing is certain, it's that uncertainty will abound?
Yes, with that setup, it's hard to make any predictions on top of that. But yeah, I guess I would just say, I talk to a lot of marketers, and one theme that is common with almost everyone I talk to is we're all overwhelmed. I mean, there's just so much happening, in the world. And while a lot of these things are exciting innovations and they're new superpowers, it's a lot of new stuff, and it is work, to stay on top of this and to learn it. And no matter how much you learn, there's always like infinitely more out there. And I think a lot of marketers feel stressed, like they feel they are personally falling behind. And I guess I just want to like assure anyone who's listening to this that it's not you. I mean, every single person, in this, like we all have that sensation. And at some level, you just have to be like, hey, this is the new normal. There's more happening out there in heaven and earth than dreamt of in our philosophy. So, let's take a deep breath, and sort of what you just want to do is like day by day be able like, okay, well, what new thing can I learn today? What new thing can we do to try and move this forward, and to try and have fun with it, because, it's overwhelming on this side, but it's kind of cool on this side too. So
Yeah,
good luck.
making wishes come true should certainly be fun. So Scott, where can people find you? At chiefmartech.com. They should follow the blog. Anywhere else where people can follow you to stay up on the trends?
Sure. So actually, so it's Chief Martech without the H at the end, so chiefmartechtec.com. And then also that at Chief Martech without the H is my handle on Twitter. So always happy to, chat with folks there.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being a guest on our show. And we look forward to seeing what the next 10 years brings.
Thank you so much for having me.